Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for tuning in for Sealaska Heritage Institute's first Friday Q&A. My name is Jay Zeller, Tlingit I am an art project coordinator at Sealaska Heritage Institute, and it is my pleasure to introduce Crystal Worl. She is Tlingit Athabascan from Raven Moiety, Sakai clan from the Raven House. She is a child of Thunderbird and from the Chilkat region in Southeast Alaska. From her mother's side, she is Dig Hitan Athabascan from Fairbanks, Alaska. Raised between Fairbanks and Juneau, she was introduced at a young age to her traditional arts, practices, and storytelling. In 2013, Crystal earned a Bachelor's of Fine Art in Jewelry Metals and an Associate's of Fine Art in Moving Images from the Institute of American Indian Arts. Crystal's artwork can be purchased in the Sealaska Heritage Store online, and all purchases support both the artist and SHI art programming that helps the community and keeps our ancient art practices alive. If you have any questions, type them in the comments and I'll read them off to our guest. Crystal Worl, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Jay. Ka kia yuchat duasak, yech ayachat lukahadi nachatsiti, afna dakahidi yechit shanguchedi yadi ayachat, gunana nachatsiti. My Tlingit name is Ka Kia, and my English name is Crystal Rose Dementive Worl. I am from Juneau and Fairbanks, Alaska. My mom is Beverly Dementive, and my dad is Rodney Worl. And I'm super honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right, for our first question today, what made you become an artist and how long have you been one?
Let's see. Growing up, my mom would bring us to WIO all the time, which is the World Eskimo Indian Olympics. And there's a lot of games there, but there's also a lot of art, a lot of skin sewing and beadwork that's there. So we grew up around that being a normal part of our lives. My mom also taught me to bead when I was a little girl. And one of my aunties is a painter, Celeste Worl. And she would send me these care packages that had paint supplies and these mysterious art materials that I didn't understand what they were, but those were some of my toys that I grew up learning to play with. So I always had a nurturing family towards my creative side. My grandma likes to tell this story of when I was 3 years old, I was running around like a little spaz, but the thing that would stop me is color. I'd be running around really crazy, and then I would stop and look at color and just observe it for a moment, and then I'd go back to running. So I think at an early age, my family recognized that I was into color or that I would be an artist. And I've been super blessed that they've been supportive of my creative endeavors and exploring everything within and outside of the art. Yeah, and as a young person, I would watch Bob Ross every Saturday morning with Power Rangers, and I started replicating what I watched Bob Ross painting. My mom put me in a painting class, and the teacher was like, wow, you're really good at this. And I was like, thanks, Bob Ross. So props to Bob. And yeah, I'm just really lucky to have grown up as an Indigenous person, being around regalia and learning how to make regalia, how to bead, how to sew as like a normal part of life, and being a part of what our family does. It was just a part of normality in my family and our upbringing. So I feel very blessed about that.
All right, my next question is, what is your favorite art form?
That's such a tough question, I feel like, for any artist, because we're all multifaceted. And one of the wonderful things of being an artist is being able to do more than one thing. I like to dip my toes in and try everything from carving to kiln cast, glass making. Right now I'm doing a lot of beading, which I haven't been beading for the past maybe 10 years, since before I was going to college. So it's good to come back to that. Probably my favorite is skin sewing. which I haven't done the most of, but it's been a really difficult learning process because that information is not super accessible. It's starting to become more accessible, learning how to do it. I'm also very lucky that I have an auntie who does skin sewing and teaches me how to skin sew, my auntie Louise Kadinger. And I also learned gut skin sewing with seal intestine from Elaine Kingikook. She's from St. Lawrence Island, and uh, fish skin tanning from Joel Isaac. And so those are probably my favorite, all the gut skin, the fish skin. It's really exciting to see the animal alive, catch the fish, pull it up, and know that while I'm eating this fish, I'm using its skin or the animal's hide to create something in my art. So I think that whole process just gives me this whole appreciation of this cycle of life that an animal can provide. And I love designing garments and regalia. And I'm really diving into fashion design with running Trickster Company. So I'm excited to dive more into beading and skin sewing.
How did you get into, like, what was the first part of art that you learned? Who got you into art?
I have to say, it was probably between my brother Rico, who was always drawing with me, my aunt Celeste Worl, who was always encouraging me to paint and sending me paintbrushes, and my mom for always just loving everything that I would make and supporting me in that sense. And then my dad would always get really excited when I'd make something. My dad isn't an artist, but he's a businessman. And just seeing my dad excited about something I created got me excited. And he would talk about how, when I made something, how I could turn it into a business or a shop, or how I could sell it, or how I could replicate it. Um, and just seeing him get really excited about it made me excited. So naturally, I became an entrepreneur and have always felt excited about being able to make a living making art. But yeah, it's definitely my family that helped root and nurture my artistic endeavors.
You mentioned your business. How did you get started with Trickster Co?
Yeah, so Trickster Company is an innovative Indigenous graphic design and art gift shop. We are online, and it is my older brother Rico Worl and I that started it about 6 years ago. At the time he had started it, he was uh, hand painting skateboard decks and selling them online. And I remember him telling me they were selling faster than he could paint or keep up with them. And he was thinking there must be a way to replicate these and manufacture them in the same way any other skateboard business does. And he wanted the idea of creating something that could actually be skated on was even more exciting for him. At the time, I was going to school at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I was working on my BFA in jewelry metalsmithing. And one of the programs that I also took was the business certificate, where they helped me create a business plan. And they asked me to envision what would I want to do to create a business with my art. So I created a business plan to open up a gift shop in downtown Juneau that has a studio in the back where people could come and meet the artist, maybe see the artist's work, talk about their work, and then buy work from the artist. I hadn't told my brother about it, and little did I know, he was doing the exact same thing, writing a business plan for Trickster Company. He's the one that came up with the name Trickster Company, the branding, and we swapped business plans, and we're like, wow, this is perfect timing. I guess we're doing this. So that was the start of Trickster Company. And eventually we opened up our brick and mortar downtown Juneau. Now we're just online, and we're hoping to, in the future, open up a shop again in Juneau, but somewhere that's bigger and more spacious because we outgrew our tiny little shop. So
Congratulations. My next question is, the University of Alaska Southeast just launched their Arts Associate's degree with a Northwest Coast art emphasis this fall. And students can get their credits transferred to Institute of American Indian Arts to pursue their bachelor's or master's degrees. Do you have any advice to someone who is thinking about taking the associate's degree at UAS and maybe go to Santa Fe to continue their studies there?
yes, I do. And as a matter of fact, if any person is interested in going to attend this program or has any questions about going to school, I would love to talk to them, and they can find me through my social media. I did work for II for recruitment for them for a while, so I know a little bit about their programming. I do have to say that going to school there was one of the best choices I've ever made. Um, at the time I had went there in 2009, it was pretty difficult to leave Alaska because I'd spent my entire life here. And being in the desert there is pretty different than Southeast area. But I'm so glad that I went there because the opportunities there were just endless in terms of learning how to do metalsmithing, learning how to work with printmaking, with painting, with ceramics, photography in a darkroom, marketing, the business certificate. They also have Indigenous liberal studies. All of the classes are mainly taught from an Indigenous perspective with textbooks by Indigenous authors, if they're available. A lot of the professors and there are Indigenous. So it's really exciting to have. That's very unique because most colleges and schools don't have that. And yet this campus is super diverse. At the time I was going there was about 500 students. It's very small, which is really beneficial because in a classroom, it's nice to get to know the teacher and the teacher to remember your name, to have that one-on-one reaction. You know, when you have questions or you're getting to know a teacher, they can help you with your struggles. In a classroom that's between 5 to 10 people. And then it's also a great way to get to know your peers. And I think the opportunity, I wish I had the opportunity to stay here at home and study at the campus here, and then get me on my feet in terms of academics and getting on the right path for getting my degree, and then sending me over to IAIA. That would have been really effective for me. My first year was really hard because the desert was like literally drying me out, and I was just missing home and missing the seafood here and my family. But I called my brother and I said, "Hey, I'm coming home. I don't think I could finish school. I just don't think I could do this." And he was like, "No, you have to do this. You're capable of doing hard things, and you're gonna go out and you're gonna go talk to people and you're gonna go make friends, and they will convince you to stay." Sure enough, I went out and I talked to 8 random people on campus and I asked them what's some of the favorite things they love about this school, why did they choose to come here, and if there was anything they wanted to say to me to convince me to stay. And sure enough, those people are still my friends to this day. And I think the opportunities that I still offers to me as an alumni is really wonderful. They're really good at staying in touch with you after you finish your degree, and sharing opportunities with alumni as well. They have an artist residency, and they're always reaching out to alumni to interact with their current students. So it's very personal, and it has a huge span of mediums you can work across to get your degree from. And there's a growing group of Alaskans that have gone and gotten their degree there.
My next question is, Is there a lesson that you wish you'd learned when you were just starting out that you know now?
I guess learning to be patient with myself, learning to find balance in taking care of not just my career and my academics and making sure that I'm doing well in life, but also my mental well-being and health. Um, it's definitely a challenge to balance exercise, getting enough sleep, eating the right food, and making sure that, you know, I'm doing the best I can to be a healthy human being. And that's hard to maintain balance when I have a full schedule. Um, Especially during college, it was very overwhelming. I was doing 15 to 18 credits per semester, and that is a lot. On top of trying to, you know, I was on the archery team and I was trying to play basketball and also work on my own designs and my own art projects. I kind of burnt myself out the first, actually, I could say I burnt myself out the entire 5 years it took me to get my degrees. So if there's any advice I could give to myself before starting school or you know, diving into my career as an artist, is to take time to take care of myself. Um, I've gotten, with quarantine and with this year, I've gotten much better at learning how to measure my sleep, how to create a routine. I've even been learning about food and calories and what is a healthier way to eat, what is a more effective way to exercise and get enough protein, get enough of my nutrients and vitamins, and hydrate enough. So it's a continuous learning curve that I will work on the rest of my life. I'm committed to, in terms of my health and well-being. And then also being honest with myself when I feel down on myself or when I feel exhausted, that it's okay to take a break. It's okay to rest, take a nap in the middle of the day. Like, if my body is tired, it's trying to tell me something that I need. So learning to just take care of myself. Another thing too is also learning to be more assertive. Uh, as a female artist, I do feel like um, people want to have a lower value of Indigenous female artists. If I could tell myself when I was starting, I would say, don't worry about overpricing your things. Find a good balance and raise your price if you feel you need to, because I cannot tell you how much artwork when I started. I spent hours and hours making a pair of earrings and I would only sell them for 20 bucks, but I would spend an entire day to make one pair. Um, so learning how to be assertive about my pricing, my time, volunteering, donating. Um, my first year after college, I had so many requests for donations of artwork, and I was literally donating my work to the point I wasn't making any money. And I had to think about it as, well, someone who works you know, in a state job, or who works in an office, or someone that works any other job, they get a paycheck every 2 weeks. And if you could imagine someone asking you to donate your 2 week paycheck every other week, you wouldn't make any money. So I had to like learn to be more assertive and be more selective of who I donate and how much. And yeah, a lot of those things were difficult to learn, because I of course want to be giving and share that and want to have that, but I also I'm like, well, how do I make a feasible living for myself that's sustainable and healthy so I don't break myself?
I have a couple comments in our questionnaire here. First one is in your new shop, because you're expanding, would you consider having an apprentice for young emerging artists?
Yes, I love that question. And actually, these past 3 years, I have been living part-time in Vancouver to do an apprenticeship with Robert Davidson. He is a Haida carver based in BC, Canada. And um, my time spent with him has really given me the experience not just to develop my art, but also prepare me to take on my own apprentice or apprentices. Um, I was hoping to start an apprentice this year, but under the pandemic conditions, I've decided this is a good time for me to work on things that were on the back burner, including projects for Trickster. Not having a physical shop has actually helped us immensely to catch up with vamping up our online website, our sales online, our social media, and working on projects that Rico and I have been just dying to do that we didn't have time to because running a physical shop is so much work. So it has its blessings. And I definitely, someday when we have a physical shop open again, we will definitely be hiring and training our staff. And when the time is right, I am so ready to take on an apprentice, whether it starts small or start full time. If there is someone that is committed to it as much as I am, I would definitely commit myself to an apprentice. I love that question. Thank you for asking that.
My next one is related to your social media. How do you use that to promote your artwork?
Yes. I think social media can be a really great tool for artists and creative entrepreneurs. For one, I do use it often to scroll through and look at what other artists are doing, and find other artists that I admire. When I'm traveling to different cities, I will research who are the big public artists in that city, and I'll find their Instagram or their Facebook. I'll follow them. I'll look at their website and kind of read about them and their history, like what did they do to get there, and how can I replicate that, because I would love to be able to do public art in this city, or bring that to my own hometown. Um, so it definitely is a big source of motivation and inspiration for me. It is a great tool for sharing my work on. I love that Instagram has the option to share a story, because I like to document what I'm doing or when I'm beading live, or I do a lot of film, and I'll film time lapse of whether it's fish skin tanning or drawing or sketching or digitizing a design for a certain project. I love that I can post that on my story. And then my page, my content I use, and that's been a little bit tricky, learning how to curate an Instagram page, because I do want to post anything and everything about my life, but I also want it to be about my art and my career, my travels. A lot of people are always very curious what I'm doing in my life and how I became an artist and what I'm doing in terms of my process. And I think social media is a great way of documenting and sharing that. It's also a timeline for me. My memory and time is not linear for me. So if I don't remember a time or what happened in the past year, I can look through my Instagram and it's basically like a visual timeline of when I did this, when I was in Toronto for that fashion show, or when I was in Santa Fe for this artist market. So it's definitely helps me on several levels. And then I can also do sales through Instagram and Facebook if I want to, which I haven't really done in a long time. But I am working on a new collection of earrings and beadwork that I will be posting and sharing on my Instagram and Facebook and selling through there, because I do know a lot of artists that sell just through social media holds. So, and it's also a great way to book clientele, or if people want me to do a lecture or a presentation or a workshop, people find me through my Instagram. It's like the best way of doing word of mouth nowadays, especially in this year. Yeah, it's a nice little portfolio. So I definitely find it's worth investing the time to have a good Instagram with a well curated page, with a link to your website in your bio, or be brief but informative about who you are and your mission. Yeah, it's definitely a wonderful tool to use. Can be.
That relates to our next question from the comments. Who are some other Indigenous women artists who influence and inspire you?
That's such a good question. There's so many. The first name that I think of is my peer, Allison Bremner, Mary Goddard, who did the ambulance design with me recently. I've been doing collaborations this year with Jennifer Younger in terms of jewelry. These are, and Lily Hope, who is a amazing chilkat weaver, who also went to IAIA. So these are 4 women I feel very close to in the Southeast area in terms of formline design, painting, weaving, graphic design, and collaborating in terms of whether it be collaborating on a Trickster Company product, like Allison designed a skateboard for us when we first opened. And Jennifer Younger and I have collaborated on jewelry where I gave her fish skin that I tanned from fish that I caught, and she incorporated it on her silver earrings. Yeah, so these are women I admire and really love their work. And one way I sort of, when I fangirl an artist, I'll find their social media, I'll follow them on there, and I'll start talking to them about what inspires them, what are they working on, and then eventually work up to the point where I'm like, oh, well, maybe someday we'll do a collaboration, or maybe you'd be interested in working with Trickster Company. And sometimes maybe it's just a small little task, like a tiny beadwork project, or I have extra materials that I made, can I send them to you? And the beginning of this year, I made these little paintings and sent them out to some of my artist friends as like a thank you for inspiring me and motivating me. Gosh, I could name so many artists right now. Kaylee Spicer is one of my best friends that I went to college with. She does incredible photography of Indigenous women and queer women. I really love her work, and she was also the one that housed me while I was in Vancouver, so she was incredibly generous to house me. And with these women, these are women that are constantly reaching out to me, and I'm reaching out to them on these opportunities, like, oh, here's a grant, I'll send it in a Facebook group message, or I'll send it to them individually, like, you should apply to this, or you should do public art. So I love these women because we have this whole attitude where our success is shared. Their success is mine, and my success is theirs. And I could name a lot more women, but I'll just keep it at that.
Thank you very much. If you're just tuning in, we are talking with Tlingit and Athabascan artist Crystal Worl. If you have questions, please type them in the comments and I'll read them off. If you're interested in finding out more about Crystal's work, you can go to her website at crystalworl.com or her store website, trickstercompany.com. You can find some of her work at Sealaska Heritage online store, sealaska-heritage-store.myshopify.com. All purchases from our store support both the artist and SHI art programming that helps the community and keeps our ancient art practices alive. And we are still accepting virtual artist in residence applications for the upcoming months. If you'd like to be featured, please apply. You can apply at our form that you can find on the link in the comments. All right, next question. Let's see here. Earlier you spoke about metalsmithing. Can you tell us how you got into it and what your favorite part about it is?
Yes, metalsmithing is really cool. When I first went to IAIA, I wanted to study film. They have a really incredible moving images program there, and was working towards getting my bachelor's in film. But then I realized I really wanted to focus on something that I could bring home and do as my own boss on my own time and with family. So I realized, being an artist and working with Rico already, I was like, well, I should get my degree in art. And my personality, I'm very indecisive. I would do everything and get a degree in everything from that school if I could. And I love film, but I think my heart is, I'm really happy that I moved into the art because my art is inclusive of film. It's inclusive of glasswork and metalsmith. When I met my teacher, Mark Herndon, he was the jewelry metalsmith professor at IAI at the time I went there. And he was incredibly sourceful and supportive and encouraging of my work, even before I was switched over to what he called the dark side, the metalsmithing degree seeking program. So I started hanging out with students that were also getting their degree in metalsmithing and hanging out with them in the jewelry studio, watching them melt and hammer at metal. I was like, this is really cool. And you guys look really tough doing it. I want to do it too. So I decided to switch my degree to metalsmithing, and I'm super happy that I did. They have a newly expanded and refurbished jewelry studio at IAIA. It's probably tripled the size since I went there. I got to learn repoussé, mokume. My favorite is lost wax cast, where you carve and form items in wax, and then you create a mold. You melt the metal to fit, and you melt the metal and you pour it into a centrifugal that spins it super fast and forces the metal to push into the mold, filling all the pockets. And then you break the mold away. It's really exciting. It's like Christmas when the mold pops off. And then you just metal work. You can forge it. You can melt it down again. You can hammer it. I'm actually wearing a little herring egg ring that I made from lost wax cast. One of my favorite native foods on my finger. So that was definitely a really fun experience to be able to work with metal, and you feel powerful when you work with metal because it seems like such a strong material that's not movable, but then you heat it, you melt it down, you watch it start on fire and then turn into this like puddle of lava, and you pour it into shapes that you create, and then you can hammer it and really manipulate the metal. That's just so exciting. Here in Juneau, I don't have a jewelry studio. I decided when I came back home that I would just focus on skin sewing, fishing and subsistence, spending time with my family, doing the best I could to be present and attend kuwik and ceremonies that I felt were important for me to witness and be present for. My brother Rico has a small engraving jewelry studio set up at his place. Sometimes I go over there. I didn't really get into engraving. I tried it and it wasn't my thing, but then Rico was doing it and I was like, you know what, Rico, we'll tag team. You get really good at this and I'll get really good at this. And then we can just say we're doing them both. And when I have ideas that I want engraved, I'll send it to him. He can engrave it. We collaborate all the time. We love collaborating with each other and with other artists, especially in the metals. And another cool thing about IAI that I learned in that program was they have a fabrication lab that has a 3D printer, a water jet cutter, and laser cutting machinery. And I learned how to use Adobe Illustrator and how to program the laser cutter to laser cut jewelry. I laser cut paper and folded the paper into these tiny little Athabascan cash houses, and then I lit them up. And I've used laser cutting to create templates for silkscreen printing, for jewelry marking, for measuring, for making my own tools. It's pretty, feels very fresh that I know how to do that. And now we use laser cutters for our own in-house manufacturing for Trickster Company. we have our warehouse in Anchorage. It has a laser cutter that I use. This is my newest piece, this feather that's laser cut on clear acrylic. And the cool thing about laser cutting is not only can it cut out a shape, it can also engrave and frost a design. So you can see that side is the shiny side. But yeah, and these are to be launched on Trickster Company very soon. Yeah, so I'd have to say one of the funnest, exciting things was learning to use a laser cutter. I work with lasers and melting metal. It's really cool.
That sounds really cool. Our next question from the comments is, how do you incorporate both of your native identities, Tlingit and Athabascan, into your artwork?
Yes, they are both very different tribes, and being at school, they called it pan-tribal, where most of the students there that were native were like more than one tribe. And it was really cool to see how other students would represent their identity through their art, infusing different designs, traditional designs, and putting them together in paintings, in their garments, in their art, and even in their writing and in their film. One way Rico and I like to do it is we study Athabascan floral patterns from Athabascan beadwork. Rico and I have a ever-growing library of art books. That's one of my weaknesses is art books. But when I need an idea and I need to brainstorm and I need to sketch, I have my sketchbook and I have a pile of books of some of my favorite artists and some books from museums that have a collection of archives of beadwork or box designs, depending if I'm trying to do a Formline design or more of an Athabascan design. One thing that Rico and I like to do is put Athabascan beadwork pattern inside of Formline or incorporate it amongst the Formline. The first time I did this was, gosh, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I did a series of Formline ravens that were somehow interacting with Athabascan beadwork patterns. Some of them were holding the flowers. One of the ravens had a berry pattern in his mouth instead of the sun. Another raven had flowers blooming out of his mouth. So if you look at my website, crystalworl.com, you'll see on the paintings, most of it is Formline design, but oftentimes in especially landscape or if there's scenery, you'll see floral patterns. That is me incorporating Athabascan beadwork patterns into the Formline work. And I'm constantly like going back and forth between the two. Sometimes they're separate, sometimes they're together. I've been beading a lot, trying to make modernized Athabascan beadwork style. It's been a minute since I've been beading, but it's all coming back to me. And these will be really neat earrings as well. That'll flare up. Woo! Yeah, so sometimes it's a challenge because when I try to mesh together two very different styles, it just doesn't look right, or it clashes, or it's too busy or too much going on. And I usually have to step back and simplify it. And sometimes I just stick to purely Formline. Since studying with Robert, it's mostly been just Formline because that's what's relevant for me and what I've committed myself to learn. But I still bead and I still plan to incorporate the two different designs within each other. And I haven't even gotten into like serious regalia making yet. So that's going to be a whole game changer in terms of fusing my Athabascan and my Tlingit and my Yupik side in my regalia, because all three of them are very different tribes and they look very different. But it'd be exciting to see Athabascan beadwork on the trim of a button blanket or something beautiful like that. So it's possible with a lot of time and exploring and a lot of messing up, but being okay with messing up is good.
You mentioned fusing a lot, and you've mentioned fusing the cultures together, but have you found that your work in one art form is informing your work in another art form?
Absolutely. I feel like I switch back and forth between painting, graphic design, garment design, skin sewing, and beading. That's sort of been like the theme of this year so far. Um, and it kind of circulates, I work on 3 projects at once simultaneously. It's probably more like 30 projects at once, and I just like have a whole bunch on the side, or I forget about this one, or I need to take a break. Um, Painting takes up the most time and definitely burns me out the most. So I typically don't do much paintings unless I have an exhibition, um, or if I'm illustrating a children's book, or if I have some form of commission, I will do the painting. But it definitely takes up a huge chunk of my time and focus to do the painting. So it's nice to have a beading project on the side to give me a break and relief from that. Or I have jewelry that I need to assemble that I put on the side for when I'm super tired and I'm done. I want to be done working on my computer and my emails or my paintings, and I just want to like veg out and watch Netflix. I can assemble earrings while I do that. Um, but yeah, they definitely overlap with one another. For example, I'm working on a collaboration with a mask carver where I'm going to bead and paint the mask, but beading and painting those together, we had to practice doing them separately. And now I have to start practicing mask carving just so that I can work effectively with this mask carver artist. Um, and painting, for example, I painted a series of seals, and now I'm working on beading a series of seals. And I also work with skin sewing with seal fur and beading seal fur as well. So they definitely overlap with one another. And I always generate ideas from alternating the other. Like I'll be working with painting a seal, and I'll be like, oh, I need to make a vest out of seal. And then I'll be beading, and I'll be like, oh, I need to bead it like this, or bead this pattern on that vest. Um, and then I'll move over to painting on a mask, and I'll be like, oh, I need to put this pattern that I painted on this painting on this mask. So they definitely overlap, and it's going back and forth between ideas and materials that help keeping the flow of ideas going.
Speaking of a flow of ideas, how do you find inspiration for your art, and how does that inspiration affect your art?
I'd have to say I get like I said it before, I get a lot of inspiration from looking at social media, because that is my handle for how I research other artists and what they're doing, and how I follow other artists in their process. Um, there's an option on Instagram where you can save a post. And for artists out there, I definitely recommend doing this. I have a collection of posts that I save. One is called painting inspiration, one is called beading inspiration, one is called fashion inspiration. I have a whole list of them. So whenever I'm feeling dry of ideas or not very motivated, I go to my saved posts and I look at, I want to do a beadwork piece, a new one. So I look at that library of saved posts that I saved of artists on social media, their work, and it regenerates motivation and ideas for me. And then I also use my sketchbook when I look at other artists' work. Robert taught me to sketch very fast when you're brainstorming and trying to think of an idea or a concept, so that you're loose and you're free, and you're not, because when I started drawing Formline, it was like, oh, I'm going to draw an ovoid, it has to be perfect, and I have to go slow. And constructing work like that takes forever, and it's stressful and can be cause a lot of tension in the art in the final piece. but I love the method that Robert showed me where you just loosely sketch out shapes and forms, and it looks very messy, but you kind of just like let go and do it. And watching Robert do that in his studio is very inspiring, because I'm like, whoa, I look at his sketchbooks and it's like just a bunch of squiggles and scribbles, but Robert Davidson did these. This is how he starts his amazing pieces. So beginning from that was very inspiring. Um, I get a lot of motivation and inspiration from books. I have a big library of books that is shared between my brothers and I. Looking at the pieces from the masters, there's that classic book, The Transforming Image, that has the box designs. That is always a reoccurring come back to for guidance on traditional formline design, or just getting inspired or stoked to create a new design and add my own flair to it. Another major source of inspiration for me is being out on the water. My uncle takes me out on the boat and to do fishing and hunting. And being able to have that gift of an animal offering itself to you to feed you and your family, and to clothe you and make regalia from. We use the hooves from deer to make rattles and aprons. We use the seal hide to make vests and garments, and sea otter to do the same as well. The fish skin is very inspiring, because salmon are essentially the strongest being on this planet. The way they navigate, how far they go, the fact that they're like near the bottom of the food chain, everyone and everything is eating them, and yet they're powerful enough to come up here, and the nutrients and the nitrogen they bring from the deep sea, their carcasses that are left in the forest created the Tongass forest. That's how rich they are in nutrients. So a big inspiration for me is being able to go out there, harvest the fish, collect them from life, and then take them and clean them, take care of them, process them. I remove the skin, I tan the skin, and then I'll like take a break and eat the salmon fillet or make some soup out of it, share it with family, and then I'll go back to skin sewing and making something out of that. That whole process is really, it's beautiful, and you just build this special relationship with that animal. I am starting to feel more confident in butchering as well, and that to me is a very creative process, and it's a lot of work. It's very exhausting, but the amount of energy that I receive back from that animal is incredible, whether it be the nutrients from feeding me and my family from that animal, or collection of that, and the textures, the temperatures, the colors from that animal, from the blood, from the intestine, from the furs, from the claws, from their little eyes, is like all those things I absorb and have to process, and will eventually use that in my art, whether it's using their hide, their skin, or even the energy that feeds me. And even their behavior affects how I depict them in my artwork. When I paint seals, they're always moving very fluid, or they have this life or energy to them. Yeah, so that's definitely a huge inspiration for me, is being subsistent, and also having this sense of pride and belonging, that knowing that this is not new. What I'm doing is not new. It's very familiar in my heritage and in my family. So I feel very blessed, and I feel very proud to do it.
The next question from the comments is, what was your inspiration behind your baby Formline?
Oh, baby Formline. So baby Formline is before I went to study with Robert Davidson. That was near the beginning of when we opened up Trickster Company, when we were getting into product design, and we started with a deck of playing cards, And then we started doing t-shirts and stickers, and everything we had was Raven. Being that Rico and I are Raven, the business is called Trickster Company. The Raven, the transforming Raven, is in our logo and in our branding. So that's what we started at. But then we would get eagles that would come into the shop and be like, "Where are all the eagles at? When are you guys gonna make eagles?" And we're like, "Oh, okay, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it." And we started doing eagles, and then we started doing salmon, and then we'd have someone from, the bear clan or, frog clan being like, "Well, where's the frogs at?" And I'm like, "Okay, I'll get to it. So one way of my study of trying to design all these different animals was baby Formline, and I wanted to share that through Trickster. But I also at the time was studying like pop art from Japan, and it's very pop, it's very bubbly, it's very cutesy, colorful, and it's just that whole culture around it. It was like, wow, everything's tiny and cute and colorful. That's wonder if we could do that with our native designs. That would be so much fun. And at the time, I wanted to work on language flashcards, and then I was also this was right before I was gonna do the baby Raven books with the baby Formline. And so I was on that track of trying to think of how to make kid-friendly designs. How can children connect with Formline? Because you look at a Formline piece, it's beautiful, but there's so much going on. Like for a child to look at it and break it down, it could be a little overwhelming, or it could be like where to begin in terms of recognizing one simple form like the ovoid. So I thought it would be a great way of also being a learning tool. And it turns out when I did the baby Formline, it was a huge hit with kids. But it also ended up being an even bigger hit with adults, because it just jived with everyone. Everyone's like, "Oh, these are really fun and cool." And then I would silk screen print them on these little 8x8 papers, and I'd use neon colors, and I would add fades of purple, pinks, and greens, and they just kind of exploded. And everyone's like, "Oh, I gotta collect them all." They're like, native Formline or native Pokemon, like all the little animals. So, but I think I've designed maybe like 40 of those little guys. They really took off, and at the time I was also starting to apprentice and study, through workshops, Formline workshops, by some of my mentors, and they were starting to guide me towards expanding on my Formline design. And when I got to Robert was like, "It's time for the babies to grow up." And I was like, "Oh." So that was a hard thing to hear, but at the same time, it was the reason I was there. It's like I needed to develop and grow my Formline. And so the baby Formline really helped me get rooted and on the right path. And I love seeing them in children's books. I love that children are so they're really interactive with kids. There is a baby Formline kit that is used in the elementary schools in Juneau, and little kids will see the Formline and they love it. And when they find out I'm the artist, they're like, "Oh, I love your work." And it's just really neat to have tiny fans.
Thank you very much. Crystal and her brother Rico Worl will be doing a lecture on artist life in 2020 with us on October 22nd, which will be streamed live on our YouTube channel from noon to 1 p.m. This is one of the 9 lectures in Sealaska Heritage Institute's Northwest Coast Art Lecture Series that is taking place this month in October. You can find the full schedule and the topics at our website, sealaskaheritage.org, on our news page. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for October's first Friday. And thank you again, Crystal Worl, for answering our questions. Have a good day.
Thank you, guys.